Welcome to the show. I'm Lex Thomas, and I am delighted to present to you today Senator Ann Gobi. She is the current sitting senator for Worcester and Hampshire districts, a seat that she took on. She was elected in 2014, swore the oath in 2015. And now, due to restructuring and redistricting, she has taken Sterling on as one of her new communities. And I wanted to take this opportunity with the election coming up on November 8th. Remember that date. Make sure that you go out and vote at the polls. But I wanted our viewers to meet Senator Ann Gobi and get a sense for her vast experience and what she is planning to bring to this term in office. Welcome, Senator Gobi. Thank you so much for taking this time with us.
No, thank you, Lex, and I really appreciate you reaching out and for the Sterling TV and to have me on. It's a bit of a gloomy day out there, but we've had some pretty decent fall in the colors as you travel around. That's one great thing about being a state senator is that I have such a beautiful district. I tell everyone that Central Mass is the place to be, especially this time of year. It's just gorgeous. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to have an opportunity to introduce myself to all your listeners.
Wonderful. And you're right, it is an absolutely beautiful area, having been transplanted here 26 years ago now from Canada, which is also the part I was from in Ontario, also very beautiful in the fall. So I'm glad to still have those wonderful fall colors. You have been in politics and around for many years. I believe that you were first elected as representative in 2001. So you've got a lot of experience that you're bringing to the table. Would you talk about that? I'm looking for both personal and professional experiences. That first, what made you even seek election back in 2001, and then to continue with re-election through all these years?
Well, to be honest, I never thought I would run for state office. I had never run for any position before, besides when I was in high school. I was class president. I don't know if that counts or not, but I had never run for any office. I had been involved in, I was on the Spencer Democratic Town Committee and was involved in some other elections. And prior to 2001, I taught school for a number of years. I was a high school history teacher. Most recently, at that time, I taught for about 8 years at Leicester High School. And at that time, in the late 80s, early 90s, I would get a pink slip, and people in the teaching profession know what that's about. At the end of the school year, if they didn't know if you would be back, you'd find a little pink slip in your mailbox, just letting you know you may or may not be rehired. And that gets a little demoralizing year after year to get that. So I decided, well, I better think of something else to do as a backup. So I went to law school at night while I was teaching, and I became an attorney. And after I passed the bar exam, I opened up my own small law practice in Spencer, where I did mainly a lot of real estate, but then I became of counsel for legal assistants in Worcester and handled their domestic violence cases. And so 2001 comes along, and a fellow who had been the state rep received a federal appointment. And it became an open seat. And I had a phone call one day from a friend of mine who happened to be a school superintendent and said, you really should think about running for this position. And, I hung up the phone and I started thinking about it. And I said, you know what? Why not? Why not? I think I have something to bring to the table. And so I did. And I ran. And interestingly enough, of course, my first election was a primary election on September 18th, 2001, which was 1 week after September 11th attacks. And so everything that I had planned on running for, if you will, because of my background in teaching, because of domestic violence background, those were the things that I wanted to kind of bring to the table. And as you know, and most people watching this, the world changed on September 11th. I personally lost a friend who was in the second plane that hit the towers on that day. And it changed many things. It changed the conversations that were happening, and it absolutely changed my focus, where I became much more focused on public safety, on what we do to that balance of protection, but still have access. The Quabbin Reservoir is a big part of my district and will continue to be. And of course, after September 11th, they shut down the Quabbin, afraid that there were going to be attacks and someone trying to poison the water system. So, and the other thing it showed me was this, that as local government, state government, and federal government, we have to be ready to pivot and to react very quickly when things happen. So that changed a lot of things for me that day, as it did for many other people. So that was, and as I mentioned, that next week, a week later, was my first primary election. And it was very interesting because if you remember at that time, people were very united. Unfortunate that it brought such a tragedy, but people on the local were so united and together. And the turnout for that election was actually extremely good. It was a special election. I was the only person on the ballot in the district, but it brought people out. And I will never forget my friend who was killed. His mom and dad were two of the first people at the polls that day. Wow. And it had a profound impact. Yes. A profound impact. So that was really how I it was sort of baptism by fire, if you will, getting elected in that year, because it was a very strange year going into 2002 as well.
Of course. Yeah.
So that's what brought me to politics. And since that time, some of the areas that I've been extremely involved in, I served for a number of years as the chair of the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Committee. I am very supportive of our local farmers. You've got great farms right in Sterling, with folks that I've worked with Mike and folks at Davis Farmland, who unfortunately went through a tragedy earlier this year with the burning of their corn maze. And I've tried to stay very involved. The sportsmen and sportswomen. You've got a great the 8 Points club that you have right in Sterling, and people sometimes forget our sportsmen and sportswomen were the first conservationists in Massachusetts, and still to this day, when they buy a hunting and fishing license, a portion of that goes to land acquisition. And we're very fortunate, and Sterling has benefited from that as well. You have a number of areas that have been protected, and when they're protected, they're not just protected for people to hunt or fish or trap. They're open, equestrians, bird watchers, people who want to hike the trails, snowshoe in the winter, and they become real gems for the area. I had a chance a couple months back to go with State Rep Meg Kilcoyne, who was a great asset to the region as well. And we were over at Lake Washakum, and to have and what a gem that is. Yep. And, and meeting with the folks there. So that is one of my areas that I'm still very passionate about. Obviously, a lot of the environmental concerns that come up.
And you've raised some interesting things there, Senator, because with the farms and of course with Lake Washakum, with the Sportsmen's and Women's Club, this is a community that very much comes together around its farmers and around its land and the resources that we have here. I mean, and one of the other reasons that the fall is just so marvelous here is, of course, all of the farm stands, all of the produce, and of course that goes through the summer as well, and even through the spring. It's something that we really miss in the winter when obviously the farm stands are not able to be open and whatnot. But this is very much a community that comes together around those people and those resources. So I think that listeners will be very happy to hear that's something to be aware of.
And absolutely rightly so. I mean, we saw during the pandemic, when the store shelves were empty, people went back to their local farmers where they could get fresh produce, fresh fruit. They know where it's coming from, and that direct market sales. In fact, a lot of people don't realize this. Worcester County has some of the highest percentages of direct farm to consumer sales of anywhere in the country, believe it or not. And it's and part of it is because of these really neat little farm stands that we have, and the small family farms. We don't have these massive farms that they have in other parts of the country, but what we do have here is quality
Yes.
and people that support it. So, and I will stand with my farmers any day of the week. People, you've seen those commercials, nothing runs like a deer.
Mm.
Nobody works like a farmer.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, absolutely. Um, One of the things that has changed for you is with redistricting. I know that you are losing some of the communities which you have served, and you're gaining others, and Sterling is one of those. Tell me what's entailed in that. How do you shift gears that way? What are the things that you are wanting to know and that you need to know about your new communities? And how can community members help you to get that information?
Thank you for that question. You're right. Of the 28 towns that I represented, I lost 13 of them, and those are towns, in some cases, that I had represented for the past 20 years.
Mhm.
And it's not just it's not it's almost like a loss of a family, to be honest with you, because it's people that you've worked with, people, projects that you've worked on, and so now to shift, as you mentioned, and bringing and having 7 new communities, it's to make those connections again, and to work with people. One advantage that I do have is that, especially with Sterling, I have represented towns within the Wachusett School District already, and now Sterling will be another community in that. So I've already have had some dealings with folks that serve on the school committee, on the finance committee, some of your select board members, because it's not, we would have meetings usually once a year with all of the Wachusett towns and those officials to get together and talk about things, and how we're going to see the school district move forward. So in that way, I've had some of those connections. As I mentioned, I've worked with some of the farmers for years on various on things, as well as the sportsmen and sportswomen. So in different groups I have dealt with, but now to actually be able to work for the entire town, I'm really looking forward to it. Sterling has a very vibrant downtown. It's, the neat little shops, and the coffee houses and the restaurants. You have a lot going for it. And as I mentioned, some of the natural resources that you have. The other thing that Sterling has that some people, you folks may take for granted, is your municipal light department. I am the Senate co-chair of the Municipal Light Caucus. Rep. Kilcoyne is a member of that caucus, and where everyone is talking about the high energy prices and what people are going, especially people with National Grid. You have a big advantage having a Muni Light. They are folks that manage things extremely well. And it's a lot of work for them. I know that prices tend to fluctuate, but you will not get, and you do not get the fluctuations that other people get. So you should be very happy to be in a municipal light.
It's a real gem. And when we really all notice it as well is during really severe weather events. We very rarely lose power here in Sterling. And if we do, it is restored pretty darn fast. It's a very efficient system, very forward-looking. So as well as the financial advantages, it's got that advantage, which is significant. That's huge. I mean, in the middle of the winter, to lose your power for weeks at a time, or even days at a time, is really traumatic. That
There's
really
no,
doesn't happen here.
no, and you are you are fortunate about that. When we've had some bad storms, uh, my mother's 90 years old, still lives by herself in the home that we grew up in. My dad passed away some years ago. But a few years back, when we had one of those horrible outages, because we're on National Grid, we were up there, and she had to have a generator running, and that sort of thing. But you folks don't have that. And I can remember reaching back out and finding out what's going on because I have other munis within the Senate district I currently have now, and they did not have that. And you're absolutely right. It's a big advantage. It's a nice advantage knowing that the people that are managing that are your neighbors, people that know the community and live here and care about it.
Yeah.
So yes.
Now, speaking of living and knowing in the communities, you mentioned earlier that you started to practice in Spencer. Are you still resident in Spencer?
I am. I've never left. I take that back. For a very short period of time, one of my brothers did a spec house in West Brookfield, and he needed somebody to live in it. So I was there for a few months. I was the guinea pig for a couple of months in his spec house. But other than that, in fact, the home that I live in was originally owned by a great aunt and uncle of mine. Has pretty much stayed in the family, and I'm less than a mile away from my mother.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure that's a huge reassurance
Yeah.
both for you and for
Well, and my
mom.
dad had my father was a World War II vet, was in the Seabees in World War II, and the GI Bill allowed him to buy a two-bay garage that was in service here in Spencer for over 50 years. And so I have five brothers, and all of us in the family pumped gas and worked at the gas station at one
Yeah,
time or another.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you ever need a tire changed, I am pretty quick. I could almost be on the NASCAR circuit.
Oh my goodness. Well, so that's another achievement of yours. As long as we're on that subject, um, tell me about what you consider to be some of your major achievements in all of your years in office.
Well, some of them unfortunately have come from places that have been pretty dire. When the COVID outbreak happened at the Holyoke Soldiers Home,
Mhm.
and we lost 77 veterans to COVID because of bad decisions that were made at the home of how they put sick people in with not sick people, and it was a nightmare. And I lost a couple of constituents in that as well, folks that I had known for a long time. In fact, one fellow by the name of Charlie Lowell, his wife a few years back before the pandemic was trying to get him into the home, that he wanted to go there, and he was so happy to be a resident of the home, and then to have to go through this and see him, because he was one of those 77 that lost his life. I was named to an oversight commission for the Holyoke Soldiers Home Oversight Commission, and we listened to hours of heart-wrenching testimony from family members who lost veterans, from the men and women who worked at the Holyoke Soldiers Home that carried horrendous guilt with them because of and nothing that they were, actions that were taken by others, decisions that were being made by other people. And from that, we did come out with a bill. There will be a new Holyoke Soldiers Home that will be built, because if we can't take care of our veterans, who can we take care of?
Sure.
There will be a new home built, but part of that also is that there will be some monetary compensation to the families. Now, I know nothing brings back, obviously, what they lost, but it was the right thing for the state to do, because mistakes were made at the highest levels, and that needed to be taken care of. The other part of that, though, is that we're looking more statewide, because right now we have a Holyoke Soldiers Home and we have the Chelsea Soldiers Home. And think about everything in between, where we really don't have a lot of facilities for our veterans. So with the legislation, and part of what the commission worked on, is that we will establish and we will have more housing and more medical housing for veterans statewide. So we're going to see that ramping up. So I'm very pleased. So again, unfortunately, it took such tragedy to get us to a place that's going to be very beneficial to our veterans.
Sure.
But I am very pleased to be part of that. I've been a member of the American Legion Auxiliary for a number of years, the VFW, as well as the VFW Auxiliary, and recently a member of the DAV Auxiliary. And even in Sterling, you have a very vibrant American Legion.
Yes,
But the temples have always been very much involved in that. And so I will do anything that I can to help veterans. And I was very pleased to see the changes that were made as a result, unfortunately, of the deaths of those 77 that we lost. So that is definitely one. I'm currently working on a few things right now. I don't know if Sterling has heard much about it, but we have an issue in many areas of Massachusetts with the crumbling foundations. And I don't know if you've heard about it, Lex, or not, but very briefly, there is a mineral. It's a naturally occurring mineral called peritite. And we have a vein of peritite that runs through central Massachusetts and up really along the 495 corridor into New Hampshire. And if that gets mixed with aggregate and it's been poured into the cement for people's foundations of their homes, unfortunately, what we have found that over a period of time, 10 to 15 years, when that mineral is exposed to water or air, it expands and it compromises the cement around it. So we have had homes literally that you can poke your finger through the foundation. And we have had homes, the Rianis and Holden have had to have, and the only way to deal with this, raise the home off the foundation, get rid of the old foundation and pour a new one. For the Rianis, who've been very public about this, that was a cost of almost $200,000 to
Oh
them.
my.
So they used up all of the equity that they had, anything that they had in the home, because the home basically was worthless if they didn't do it.
Do it, right.
The cash in retirement, and because they wanted to be able to remain there, but a lot of people don't have that. So
Right.
I'm working right now, and this is an issue I've been involved with for about 6, 7 years. And we've been able to get some reimbursement for testing. We have seen, unfortunately, a lot more houses in the Holden Rutland area with this, and homeowners don't want to come forward
Mhm.
because the minute that they come forward to say that they have the issue, banks
Right.
typically aren't going to give any money to
Money
fix
to
it
them. Right.
because and unfortunately, homeowners insurance will not cover it because it's not they would cover it if it's a sudden collapse,
Uh-huh.
because it's something that will take place over a number of years.
Yeah.
It's not covered. So I'm working very hard on this issue. There is a grassroots organization called Massachusetts Residents Against Crumbling Foundations
Mhm.
who do a fantastic job of educating people. And I'm going to keep at it. What we're hoping to do is try to get some testing done at the quarries. So if we can stop that material from going into aggregate for construction of homes, it would be very helpful.
Right.
The governor on his part was a little bit late to the table on things, but I'm very pleased that recently, even though he vetoed a bill that I had filed for to do the testing, I
Mhm.
think we're working towards some resolution on that. But even in the letter that he sent me, he acknowledged that this is a major problem, and not just for homes. He actually wrote in the letter that it could affect our infrastructure.
Interesting.
So,
Right.
yes. So this is, and it's not going to go away. It's an
No.
issue that will not go away. So that is one that I am going to, be like a dog with a bone on, because we need to get our hands around it, because if people can't afford to fix their foundations, and if they have this, they're going to walk away. And then that affects everybody's property values if you have a home that is worthless sitting at the end of your street.
Of course. Wow. I was going to ask you about issues that have been particularly challenging, but it sounds that as if the ones that are the achievements have also had these incredible challenges.
Everything
Everything
has
has achievements,
challenges.
right?
When I was first elected too, unfortunately, and again, it sounds like it's all doom and gloom, but often legislation gets going because of something that had happened, and usually
Yes.
it's something good that
Yeah.
happened.
Yes.
Constituents of mine and have become friends with the Bish family. And after Molly Bish had gone missing, I've worked with that family, and right now we're working on trying to bring a little bit more DNA analysis into Massachusetts, and to allow expanded DNA to be used to try to get through some of these cold cases that we
Mm-hmm.
have in Massachusetts. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't allow that right now. I did file a bill last year on it. It hasn't gone too far. I'm going to have to refile it, and that's challenging because there are
Yeah.
a lot of people that feel that there are some personal issues that, and I get that.
Right.
And again, you think about that balance between
Yes.
public safety and
And privacy
personal
and
privacy rights.
and
So I'm going to continue to work on that because I do think it's an important issue, and one that possibly could help maybe solve some of these old cases that unfortunately we have way too many of in Massachusetts.
yeah, we do. And when you think of how horrific that must be for families, for victim families, and to just not know and to not have information when there is a means by which you could get it, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Tell me something about the committees on which you currently serve.
So I currently chair the Higher Education Committee, which is a terrific committee. I'm a product of Worcester State College, well now Worcester State University. I'm a big proponent of our community colleges and our state college and university system, as well as our private colleges. And we're really fortunate when you think just in the Worcester area, we have 7 schools, private and public, that are right here of higher education. And but we have to make sure that we're putting enough money into higher education as well. We've done that with K through 12, which is great, but what happens after high school? And the other part is not every student is, and they don't need to be a 2-year or 4-year college graduate, but if they want to be, they should have that opportunity. I'm
Mhm.
a big proponent as well of vocational schools, and we have a lot of great vocational schools around, and we also have a lot of traditional high schools that are trying to bring back what are called Chapter 74 programs, some vocational programs back into the schools to because they see, at one time I graduated from David Prouty High School in Spencer in 1980. And at that time when I was in high school, a lot of people thought of the Voc schools as a dumping ground, that the kids that couldn't hack it. That is not the case at all. You get the best and brightest that are going through our vocational schools. And the manufacturing that we have in central Massachusetts, and we're trying to revitalize, that's not the manufacturing of 100 years ago. These are pristine
Mm.
factories that you walk into with multi-million-dollar machines, and they need people who are educated on those machines and know how to use them. And so there's a lot of things that we can do to strengthen both our education system as well as making sure that we have the workforce that is necessary going forward, because we know that people are retiring at pretty high rates, and we need to have those people there. And our blue collar and white collar workers are just as important.
I think that you're going to get a lot of support on that. My high school years and my graduation were approximately the same years as yours. And I
Mhm.
remember at that time, yeah, it was considered a dumping ground, that it was, you didn't go there if you could get into, university and
Right.
that sort of thing. And now I think things are so different. I think that, there are so many highly educated people, coming out of the universities that aren't getting career satisfaction, aren't
Right.
getting the kinds of jobs that they had hoped for. And yet there are all these opportunities, but you have to have that skill set. And so
You need
where
the
do you
skill set, and you have to be able to match
to
to match.
match exactly,
Yes.
yeah. What other committees are you working?
I also am on the Ways and Means Committee, which of
Mhm.
course pretty much every bill finds its way through that, and
Sure,
which is a great committee to be on. And I'm on the Veterans Committee
right,
as well, that I've done a lot of work on and will continue to do a lot of work on. So those are a few that
sure.
I've probably served the longest on.
And just to wrap up a little bit here,
Sure.
what are just looking at Worcester County, and I'm focusing on Worcester County because that's where we are right now. What are, over these next few years, the greatest challenges that you're seeing? What are the urgencies? What are you most concerned about addressing?
Well, as I mentioned, I think most people get very concerned when they walk into a grocery store or fill their car, and when they open that next, besides in Sterling, when they open their next electric bill, and those are concerns that aren't going to go away,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and as you know, if you've been around in politics or just been around living long enough, we go in cycles. But you know what? In my lifetime, I had never had a pandemic before.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with a lot of the fallout from that, and we will continue to. So going forward, we have to figure out how to make our communities more resilient
Mhm.
in many ways.
Mhm.
And it starts at the local level. I give a lot of credit. People will say, "Oh, your job's so hard." The hardest job there are folks that work at the local level.
Yeah.
Your local selectmen. I don't think there's too many jobs harder than a local police chief and a fire chief. When you're having to respond to maybe an overdose somewhere and it's your neighbor's kid. I mean, there's nothing worse, right? Or going to a car accident where it's someone that's been fate, a fatality of people that. So those type of issues that we have to deal with, that we need to work together. And I mentioned very quickly about the opioid. The That has not gone away. When you talk to your local police and fire and EMS, they are seeing just as many, and in many cases, higher incidences. The behavioral and mental health needs that our youth are finding, a lot of it because caused through the pandemic, about some of the isolation that they went through. When you think about it, the kids that came into kindergarten this year, they will be the first students not to be directly affected by the pandemic. So we're going to go through 12 years
Right.
of students that have been affected, and we need to prepare for that. And when I say we, as a state, as a federal government, and the locals working together, whether it's making sure that we have enough behavioral health and mental health services for people of all ages, but especially our youth, because if we don't do early intervention, the problems, if they don't get taken care of at an early age, they're just going to exacerbate as they get older. And so we need to do a lot to kind of shore up our communities. And those are some of the focus areas that I will be focusing on going into this next session, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected.
Senator Gobi, thank you so much for spending this time with me and with our viewers. I have been talking to Senator Ann Gobi. She is the sitting senator for the Worcester and Hampshire district. Sterling is now under her purview with redistricting. Representative elected in 2001, in 2014 elected as a senator, which she began that tenure in 2015. So lots and lots of experience there. So make sure you get out there and vote on November 8th. Senator Gobi, thank you once again, and all the best in the election.
Thanks, Lex. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.